All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we are diving deep, and I mean deep, into a topic you guys have been requesting for, like, forever.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
The one, the only, the legendary salmon-and-lox-bagel.
No way. All right, let's do it.
That's right. You sent in a whole podcast episode dedicated to this breakfast, I don't even know, icon. Is that going too far?
I don't think so.
And we're going to unpack every delicious little secret they reveal.
I actually think you might be surprised by how much there is to say about the salmon-and-lox-bagel.
I'm ready.
We're talking history, technique, even economics, all wrapped up in this one seemingly simple dish.
Okay, so let's break it down step by step. Just like in the podcast, Breakfast Bliss. First things first.
The bagel itself.
Of course. They start with the base of all this deliciousness, the bagel. And they get, well, pretty intense about the toasting process.
How so?
Golden brown, crispy on the outside, you know the deal, but still soft and chewy on the inside.
Okay, I'm with them there. There's nothing worse than a bagel that's just like rock hard all the way through.
Exactly. And while we're on the subject of bagels, they're pretty adamant about choosing the right bagel, too.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, they say in everything bagel, you know, with the poppy seeds and the sesame seeds, adds a kind of nutty complexity.
Sure.
But if you want to let the other flavors really shine, then a plain bagel is your best bet.
Like a blank canvas.
Exactly. Or, and this is where I get a little wild, cinnamon raisin bagel.
Whoa, hold on. Sweet and savory all at once. I don't know about that.
It could work. But okay, so we've got our perfectly coasted, perfectly chosen bagel. What comes next?
The cream cheese, obviously.
Yes, and they call me out specifically on this one because I'm so guilty of uneven spreading.
You and me both.
But Breakfast Bliss really emphasizes making sure every single bite has that perfect creamy goodness.
Okay, that makes sense. Spread that love.
Right. No sad cream cheeseless bites. You know, all this talk about bagels is making me think, where did they even come from?
Well, fun fact, bagels actually have a super long history.
Do tell.
They date back centuries, all the way to the Jewish communities in Poland.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah. It's kind of wild to think that the same chewy bagels we love today were once, you know, a staple food in a completely different part of the world.
That's incredible. And speaking of journeys, the podcast then shifts to the star of the show, the lox, or smoked salmon.
All right, let's talk salmon.
They recommend about 2 ounces per bagel, which honestly seems like a lot.
It looks like I could probably handle it.
Right. But the key here, they say, is choosing high-quality lox. And they actually dive into the economics of why good lox can be so pricey.
Yeah. You know, I've always wondered about that because it's not exactly cheap.
It's not. They talk about wild-caught versus farmed salmon, sustainable fishing practices.
Oh, right.
The whole smoking and curing process, which takes, like, serious expertise and time. All of that factors into the cost.
So we're not just paying for a fancy label, we're paying for a tradition.
Exactly. It really makes you appreciate that delicate, smoky slice of lox. You know?
Absolutely. Every bite is precious.
Oh, and before I forget, they drop a super important pro tip at this stage.
Hit me with.
Make sure you get some salmon in every single bite.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that with the cream cheese. No sad bites allowed.
Exactly. It's all about balance.
Yeah.
Speaking of balance, you know what's coming up next?
Toppings, baby.
The moment we've all been waiting for. And this is where things get personal because everyone has their favorite.
What does Breakfast Bliss recommend?
Well, the host is a huge fan of peppery arugula, which makes sense. But they also shout out the classics. You know, crisp cucumbers for that refreshing crunch,
Love a good cucumber.
juicy tomato slices, and red onions for a little zing.
Okay, see, red onion is where they lose me. I'm not a fan.
Really. See, I could go either way.
Yeah.
But you know what my absolute must-have is?
Don't tell me. Capers.
Capers. That tangy burst, it just makes the whole thing.
I get it. Capers are good.
But honestly, I've never really stopped to think about why certain toppings work well together.
You just go with your gut.
Pretty much. I always figured it was just personal preference, you know?
Well, prepare to have your mind blown because apparently there's a whole science behind it.
Get out.
It's all about creating contrast and complementing the main ingredients. Like the tanginess of the capers cuts through the richness of the salmon and cream cheese.
Okay, I can see that.
And the crisp cucumber provides a fresh counterpoint to the smokiness of the lox. It's like a symphony of flavors.
You're getting a little poetic here, but I love it. So we've got this amazing base, the high-quality lox, and endless topping possibilities. It's more than just a sandwich, isn't it?
It's an experience.
Exactly. And, you know, the podcast actually goes on to explore that very idea, the cultural significance of this seemingly humble dish. But before we get too deep into that, I think we need a little break.
Yeah, let's let all this deliciousness sink in for a minute.
Exactly. When we come back, we'll dive into how the salmon and lox bagel became more than just breakfast. It's a story you definitely don't want to miss. All right, so we're back and ready to explore how this stack of deliciousness, the salmon and lox bagel, became more than just breakfast.
You know, you touched on something earlier when you were talking about bagels coming all the way from Poland.
Yeah, that blew my mind.
Well, the Breakfast Bliss podcast actually goes into that a little more. They talk about how the salmon and lox bagel is like deeply ingrained in certain regions.
Oh yeah, like where?
Particularly New York City. They say it's practically a culinary symbol of the city.
You know, that's so true. I mean, it's right up there with pizza and hot dogs when you think about classic New York food.
Exactly. It's become this cultural touchstone. Think about it. It represents like a blend of immigrant history, culinary innovation, and even a certain urban lifestyle.
Wow, when you put it like that, it really is more than just a sandwich.
Right. It's fascinating how food can become so connected to a place and its people. And the podcast also points out that it's a dish that's evolved over time, too. You know, people have added their own twists and variations, making it their own.
So it's not just a static recipe, it's a living tradition.
Exactly. And that evolution is constantly being shaped by individual preferences, cultural influences, even global trends.
Oh yeah, like a few years ago, everything bagel seasoning was all the rage.
Right. And now you see it on, like, everything, from chips to popcorn. It's interesting how those trends influence even these classic dishes.
Absolutely. And speaking of classic, the podcast spends some time talking about the visual appeal of the salmon and lox bagel, too.
Like how to make it look as good as it tastes.
Exactly. They even suggest, like, garnishing it with a sprig of fresh dill, serving it with a lemon wedge, you know, those little touches.
It's all about presentation.
Right. And they specifically say, if you've never tried capers before, this is the dish to give them a chance.
Okay, I'm a caper fan, so I support that message.
They bring a briny, almost floral complexity.
They do, and they're packed with antioxidants too, which is a bonus.
So we've covered the ingredients, the techniques, the flavors, the cultural impact. What really stuck with me from this Breakfast Bliss episode were some of those, like, unexpected facts they threw in.
Oh yeah? Like what?
Did you know that lox actually refers to a specific type of salmon preparation?
Wait, really? So it's not just another word for smoked salmon?
Nope. True lox is cured with salt, not smoked. It has a silkier texture and a way more intense salty flavor.
The more you know.
Right. And there are even different types of lox, like Nova, which is cold smoked, and belly lox, which is the fattiest and richest cut.
Okay, I'm adding belly lox to my grocery list.
And another thing that blew my mind, capers are actually unopened flower buds
No way!
from a Mediterranean shrub. Isn't that wild? They've been eaten for centuries for both their flavor and their supposed medicinal properties.
I mean, they're pretty powerful little buds.
They really are. This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's amazing how much history, culture, even science is packed into something that we probably take for granted.
I know, right? It's like looking at this everyday dish with a whole new perspective.
Exactly. So I know you've probably been thinking about building your own, like, ultimate salmon and lox bagel this whole time.
Oh, absolutely. I've got ideas brewing.
Well, we're going to get into that right after the break. We'll explore different flavor profiles, topping combinations, and maybe even challenge some of those traditional notions. Okay, so we're back. And I'm thinking about our listener right now, maybe on their way to the deli counter.
Or like already digging into their fridge.
Right. They're ready to whip up their own salmon and lox masterpiece after all this talk. So what's the final takeaway? What should they be thinking about as they assemble this culinary icon?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. The history, the technique, the flavors, even the cultural impact and the economics of it all. But I think if there's one thing I really hope our listener takes away from this whole deep dive, it's a sense of appreciation.
Appreciation. Okay, what? Exactly.
For the craftsmanship, the artistry, the tradition that goes into even the simplest version of this dish.
I like that.
Yeah.
But, before we let them go, we have to address that big question we left hanging.
Oh, you mean?
The ultimate salmon and lox bagel. If you could build yours, no holds barred, what would it look like?
That is a really good question. There are just so many possibilities.
I know, right?
Okay. So for me, it would definitely start with a perfectly toasted everything bagel.
Got to have those seeds.
Absolutely. Then a schmear, and I mean a generous schmear, of cream cheese, maybe even whipped, for extra airiness.
Oh, I like where your head's at.
And then, of course, the star of the show, the lox. I'd go with Nova, those delicate, smoky slices.
All right, I'm with you so far. This is a solid base. Now, for the toppings, are you a purist? Or are we about to get a little crazy?
I like to think I walk the line between tradition and innovation.
Okay, so what does that look like on your ultimate bagel?
Definitely some thinly sliced cucumbers for that refreshing crunch, and a sprinkle of capers, of course. Gotta have that briny
Right.
burst.
Classic, classic.
Yeah.
But you said innovation. What else are we adding?
Maybe some pickled red onions. Just a touch for some sweetness and acidity.
Ooh, that's a good call.
And you know what? Maybe a few sprigs of fresh dill for that herbaceous note.
Sophisticated. Very nice.
What about you? What's on your ultimate salmon and lox bagel?
Okay, well, I'm going in a slightly different direction. I'm thinking a poppy seed bagel toasted to absolute perfection.
Okay, I can work with that.
And then, instead of cream cheese, a layer of herbed goat cheese, for a tangy twist.
Ooh, interesting.
And the lox, obviously, front and center. But then, this is where I get a little wild. I'm adding some thinly sliced avocado for creaminess.
All right, I see you.
A sprinkle of everything bagel seasoning for that extra crunch and flavor. And then just a drizzle of sriracha for a little heat.
See, that's what I love about this whole thing. There's no one right way to do it. It's your bagel, your creation.
Exactly. And that's kind of the overall takeaway, right? Even if you think you're a salmon and lox bagel expert, there's always something new to discover.
Right. This deep dive has definitely proven that.
But I mean, who knew there was so much to learn about this dish? The history, the different types of lox, all the topping possibilities, the cultural impact.
It's all connected.
It really is.
Yeah.
So next time you're craving a salmon and lox bagel, take a minute to appreciate every single element that goes into that bite. And don't be afraid to get creative. Make it your own.
Exactly.
Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive. It's been a real pleasure exploring the world of the salmon and lox bagel with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, happy eating.